Mists of Pandaria Classic is dead. Dunzo, finished, 6 feet under, and it's all Blizzard's fault. Well, technically, it's still going, but it's certainly on its way to being dead with a dwindling player population, a phase that's going to last longer than anyone asked for, and zero indications from Blizzard that it'll be continuing into WoD Classic. The population of MoP Classic continues to drop to all-time lows with each passing week, and we're now at a point where the population is almost lower than when Season of Discovery was announced. It was no longer getting new content. The ironic part is at the time, they also announced they were offering free level 80 boosts on MoP Classic for those who successfully killed the first boss of the Scarlet Enclave in Season of Discovery. The very same game Blizzard was pushing players to at the end of SOD is now at its wit's end less than a year later and before any official announcements of ending the Classic series of MoP. And the problem? It's less about what they have confirmed, but rather what they have not said in regards to the future of MoP Classic and the support or lack thereof thus far. But before we get into that, let's start with revisiting how MoP Classic started and how we got to the abysmal state the game is in now. MoP Classic released on July 21st last year, and the only player count stats we have from release are from raids and arenas on Ironforge. The first PvP season started on July 29th, and the first raid, Mogu'shan Vaults, released on July 31st. So these numbers show us that there were around 157,000 players raiding and PvPing after the first week of release, and the population peaked at 200,000 by week 7. A little less in comparison to Cataclysm Classic release, but a thriving population nonetheless. Cataclysm Classic peaked in week 4 at 317,000 players raiding and doing arenas. So the hype around MoP Classic was certainly less than Cataclysm, but it was still a thriving population enough to sustain the game and keep it enjoyable. But for the raiding scene, the first raid tier of MoP had 3 different raids that had staggered releases, so the peak in player count lines up with the release of the final of the 3 raids that came out, the Terrace of Endless Springs. The player population was sustaining for the first 2 months or so after initial release, and you could tell Blizzard was highly involved in maintaining the game in a playable and enjoyable state. They were doing class tuning to help with class balancing, which was received positively for the most part, and that showed us that Blizzard was attempting to listen to the feedback from the community. But with class tuning, there's always some unhappy people in the end because their class didn't get buffed. Or, in this case, they're unhappy because the tuning affected their guild's race to world first strategy with class stacking, which led to this fun clip.
Right, Blizzard. We lost? We just got by bro. Where are the patch logs, man? Where but what the bro? There literally no change log. There was no change log. Our entire strat just got completely we actually got completely giga because they didn't put change log. Like you, man. That's bullshit. That is bullshit.
It certainly sparked some reactions, but MoP Classic was getting attention throughout the WoW community. Even Liquid's Maximum was keeping up with the race drama at the end of the first tier of progression.
Right, Blizzard.
Whoa, dude! Bro, killing a boss and ripping Blizzard first global is so funny.
And classic progression races aren't nearly as popular as retail's race to world first. But all in all, MoP Classic was off to a great start, all things considered. But similar to other classic releases, it wasn't long before Blizzard started to drop the ball and the population started to decline and people started raid logging. The content started to become stale, and people were already hungry for new content. The first raid tier was out for about 20 weeks, which is a bit long for a classic raid tier. It, of course, wasn't nearly as long as the original, where people had to wait 7 months before the Throne of Thunder originally released. But the classic community was more used to having a raid tier last anywhere from 16 to 20 weeks. In this case, 20 weeks was clearly a bit too long for the content, and you can see this reflected in the player counts. By the last week of the raid tier, the player count was as low as 71,000 players, not even half the peak player count on release. The release of the Throne of Thunder raid helped the player count, of course, with the population bumping up to about 111,000 players on the release week, just over half of the peak player count. However, Throne of Thunder was absolutely riddled with bugs, and you could tell Blizzard was becoming either less invested, or they were just incapable of fixing the bugs plaguing the game. They had 3 whole PTR sessions to fix these bugs, and they still released the raid with them. The bugs were so bad that you could wipe on Darumu the Forgotten multiple times, and there was literally nothing you could do about it. You could potentially point to this bug as the very reason that progress one of the top classic guilds in the world, racing for World's First, decided to call it quits because this very bug caused them to wipe multiple times, and it was potentially the biggest reason why they ended up losing the race to Newman. Check this clip out.
Huh? Huh? Huh?
So, for those of you unfamiliar with Darumu, you are supposed to reveal those red crimson fog ads with these light beams that follow a player as you move around the room with their corresponding colored beam. So, the red beam reveals the red ads, the blue, and the yellow reveals the yellow ads. Pretty straightforward. However, Progress had 2 of those red ads appear before the beams were even active. And normally, the raid blows up if you reveal one of those crimson ads and walk past it with the beam and the ad is unrevealed. But in this case, since the fight was bugged, they just insta-wiped as soon as the beam spawned because 2 of those crimson ads already revealed before they phased. And this wasn't the only bugged pull Progress had during the race, so you can only begin to imagine how irritating this was for them after spending hours upon hours practicing for this. Now, Throne of Thunder released on December 11th. It's now April, and this bug still exists in the game. Not only does this bug still exist, but they even attempted to fix this bug and some others with a hotfix, but it created even more bugs, like this fun one on Twin Empyreans, where DPS can get targeted with the tank debuff during the phase transition, and you're just basically forced to die because you can't survive it as a DPS. Fun times. As you can imagine, having to deal with these bugs on a weekly basis for months on end has an effect on the player population. It makes you wonder if Blizzard actually cares that these bugs exist and if they care at all about the players and their experience playing the game. There are many more bugs in the Throne of Thunder raid that I won't cover because we'll be here all day if I went over all of them. It's just so unfortunate these bugs persist because the Throne of Thunder is considered by many to be one of the top 5 best raids of all time. And Blizzard just absolutely fumbled the bag on this one. Now, the bugs are bad, but they're not the only thing driving players away from the game. On January 29th, just a few months ago, Blizzard held their annual State of Azeroth and provided players with a roadmap for the year for all versions of the game. The roadmap gives a general idea of what content players should expect to release during the year and a vague timeline of when it releases. Now, there are 2 glaringly obvious parts of this roadmap that stand out. The first is that both Retail and Anniversary have content going past BlizzCon, but mopclassic has absolutely nothing. The fact that Blizzard left this section blank and had nothing listed after Siege of Orgrimmar releases was a major blow for those hoping to see mopclassic continue into Warlords of Draenor. Now, some of you might not think this would have been popular to begin with anyway, but there's something psychologically going on when players see potentially no future for the game they're playing. That causes players to give up or quit the game. After all, why would you continue investing all your time in a version of the game that's just going to die in a few months with no guarantees that all that work is going to carry on to another version of the game? That's like continuing to prepare for a marathon after it was already announced to be canceled. The motivation behind the preparation is no longer there. Now, the other obvious part of the roadmap is it revealed that the next raid, Siege of Orgrimmar, would not release until the summer. So that means Throne of Thunder was going to be the current content for at the very least 6 full months, if not more, which is very long for a classic raid. Assuming Blizzard considers June as the start of summer, that's 26 weeks of Throne of Thunder raiding if you raided every single week from release until the next phase. And that is insanely long. You're going to burn out before the next phase. Now, as you can imagine, we start to see a stark drop-off in player population in the weeks following the release of this roadmap, dropping from about 96,000 down to 62,000 players just a month later. And the player count is actually probably even less than that because we can't tell how many of those raiding and doing arenas are the same players on their alts. That's at least an over 30,000 drop-off in people playing the game. That's a staggering drop in player count in a short amount of time. And it only gets worse as the weeks continue, even after the next phase, Phase 4, released on March 31st very recently, which came out with the next part of the Legendary Cloak questline. we're down to averaging at most 50,000 players over the most recent weeks. Now, you might be wondering, was this drastic drop in player population inevitable? Could it have been prevented? In my humble opinion, Blizzard poorly handled MoP Classic and is solely responsible for the current state of the game. I think it was preventable, and I don't think it would have taken very much support from their end to keep more players playing the game. We had 3 PTR sessions for Throne of Thunder, and it still released with many bugs. Now obviously, releasing without those bugs that cause wipes and make bosses almost unplayable would have helped the state of the game, but if this was truly unavoidable, they could have at least made the effort to try to quickly fix these bugs so that players don't have to deal with them for weeks or even months on end. This screams Blizzard doesn't care about MoP Classic from a player's perspective. And then, with the State of Azeroth roadmap, if by some miracle Blizzard does plan on releasing WoD Classic, which I don't think they will, they should have just included it in the roadmap. This would have given the current Classic players something to look forward to, and given them more of a reason to keep playing the game. They announced MoP Classic releasing in 2025 State of Azeroth, so there's no reason in my mind to hold this announcement off until BlizzCon. Or, if they aren't planning to continue in a WoD Classic, and are truly ending Classic like most believe they are, don't include MoP Classic in the timelines. This would have been better than basically confirming the end of the game for many people. Obviously, this probably would have left some people feeling a little bit confused because they didn't include it, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but including nothing in the timeline for after BlizzCon and indicating Throne of Thunder would last until the summer was definitely not the play. What do you think Blizzard should have done here? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear them. Thanks for watching, and have a blessed day.